gravel crunched under the car's tires as Sam gripped the steering wheel, leaning forward to get a better view of the road ahead. The trees on either side seemed to close in like towering sentinels, their dark forms swaying faintly in the salty breeze. Rachel, sitting in the passenger seat, scrolled through her phone one last time before the signal completely disappeared. Everyone says it's like stepping into another world. No crowds, no noise, just the ocean and us, she said, her excitement barely contained. Sam offered a half smile, though he was uneasy. The road had grown increasingly narrow and isolated, and the lack of cell service had only added to his sense of disconnection. Still, he said nothing. Rachel had been looking forward to this getaway for weeks. "Almost there," Rachel announced, pointing at the blinking dot on the GPS. The road ended abruptly at a clearing. Before them was the retreat, a cluster of weathered wooden cabins perched on the edge of a dramatic cliff. Below, the ocean stretched endlessly, its waves crashing far below against jagged rocks. The main lodge stood at the center, a two-story building with a faded sign that read, "Haven's Rest." A man emerged from the lodge as they pulled up, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his 60s, wiry, with a weathered face that reminded Sam of driftwood. "You must be Sam and Rachel," he said, his smile barely reaching his eyes. "Welcome to Haven's Rest. I'm Henry. My wife Marjorie and I run this place. Hope you're ready for some real peace and quiet." Rachel beamed. "We've been looking forward to this for ages." Henry nodded but didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on their car, as if checking for something. Then, shaking off whatever thought had distracted him, he handed them an old-fashioned key. "Cabin 7, far into the property, closest to the cliff. Beautiful view," he said, then added with a chuckle, "and no neighbors to bother you." Sam took the key, but something in Henry's tone struck him as odd. He couldn't decide if it was a joke or a warning. The cabin was charming in its own way, small but cozy, with a stone fireplace, a worn rug, and a single large window that framed the ocean like a postcard. Rachel immediately set about unpacking, while Sam took a walk to the edge of the cliff. The view was breathtaking but unsettling. The ocean, instead of its usual endless motion, seemed strangely sluggish. The waves moved, but not naturally. It was as if something beneath the surface was forcing them to rise and fall. "Sam," Rachel called from the porch. He turned to see her holding up a bottle of wine. "Come on, let's toast to the vacation." By nightfall, the couple was settled in front of the fireplace playing a board game. The ocean murmured in the background, a soothing rhythm that blended with the crackle of the fire. But as the hours ticked by, the comforting sounds began to change. First, the fire in the hearth started flickering erratically, as if an unseen wind were blowing. Then the rhythmic crash of the waves faded until there was nothing but silence. Rachel looked up, frowning. "Do you hear that?" Sam set his game piece down. "Hear what?" "Nothing." The waves stopped. The realization sank in, heavy and unnatural. Sam stood and moved to the window. Outside, the ocean was completely still. Not a ripple, not a sound. "Maybe it's a tide thing," he muttered, though he didn't believe it. Then came the noise, a deep, guttural growl, distant but unmistakable. "What the hell was that?" Rachel whispered, joining him at the window. Sam scanned the darkness but saw nothing. "Probably just an animal. It's pretty wild out here." Rachel wasn't convinced. She turned toward the door, and her breath caught in her throat. "Sam!" Deep scratches marred the wooden door, fresh enough that the splinters still clung to the edges. By the time they reached the main lodge, the air had grown colder, the sky an oppressive gray. Their flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the path in jerky intervals. The lodge was empty when they arrived. The front desk was deserted, the small bell sitting untouched on the counter. Behind it was a guest book, its pages yellowed with age. Rachel flipped it open, scanning the names. "Look," she whispered. Each name had been crossed out, the ink pressing deep into the paper as though done in anger or fear. "Maybe it's a prank," Sam suggested weakly. but he didn't believe it. Before Rachel could respond, the temperature in the room plummeted. A faint whisper, like the rustling of leaves, filled the air. The single light bulb above flickered, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, something moved. A tall, gaunt silhouette emerged from the far corner, its limbs impossibly long and thin. Its head tilted unnaturally as it regarded them. "Run," Sam whispered, his voice barely audible. They bolted, the flashlight beams shaking wildly as they sprinted down the path. The figure followed, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were being controlled by invisible strings. They didn't stop running until they stumbled into a clearing. Moonlight revealed a strange sight, a circle of cabins identical to their own. At the center was a stone well, its cover half open. "What is this place?" Rachel gasped, clutching Sam's arm. The growl came again, this time closer. From the well emerged the figure, its face obscured by dripping seaweed. Its elongated fingers gleamed with water as it crawled toward them, its body folding in ways that defied logic. Sam grabbed a fallen branch and swung at the creature, but it passed through as if made of mist. "It's not real," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "Rachel, Will!" Sam shouted. They ran to the edge and peered inside. The water churned violently, reflecting not just their faces but something else. Other faces, twisted in the silent screams. "We have to jump," Rachel said, her voice barely audible. Sam hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking her hand. Together they leapt into the icy depths. When they surfaced, gasping for air, the world had changed. The retreat was gone. The cabins, the lodge, even the forest. Everything had vanished. They were standing on an endless expanse of beach, the ocean stretching infinitely before them. Sam turned to Rachel, his voice trembling. "What just happened?" She didn't answer. She was staring at the sand, her face pale. Wet footprints trailed from the water's edge to where they stood. And they weren't alone. Far down the beach, figures were emerging from the surf, tall, gaunt, and dripping with seaweed. The silence of the shore was broken by a whisper that carried on the wind. "You never leave Haven's Rest." The end.